down, chop it down, chop it down, you gon' chop it down. Chop it down, you gon' chop it down. I just appreciate everybody watching. Watch him throw the ball, we gon' pick it off. You gon' let him hit the hole or you gon' cut it off. You gon' play through 4th and long or you gon' punt it off. Your defenders, heavy hitters, put your pads in. Don't be looking for the ref to throw no flags in. Keep the helmet on, keep the cleats tight. You the type to want to win by any means, right? You should look alive. This is Trap or Dive.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to another episode of Trap or Dive podcast provided to you by 214 Media and SB Nation's Hogs Haven. I am your host, Mual. In here with AJ and Dre. Record the episode. Look, so I don't have any non-draft topics to talk about. I think we could go ahead and get them right. I mean, unless AJ, I saw your tweet. I wanted to save this on the show. You know, I did see a tweet about snowfall. I don't think it's a good time to talk about it. I'm not sure. But I just saw it, so it was kind of crazy. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it alone. But Shorty crazy. My Dukes a wild. She a wild one.
Hey man, this has been an amazing season. So many things have happened that couldn't even predict. I never would have thought
accident hit the enter button.
Yeah, I was like, why am I hearing Trap or Dive music again in my ear? But yeah, I never thought that she'd be the one not to spoil it for anybody else.
Yeah. AJ, Dre, man, how y'all doing? Y'all straight? Y'all good?
I'm good, man. Like, I don't watch Snowfall, but maybe I'll watch it one day, so don't spoil it for me, you know.
Well, luckily for you, the season is about to end. The series is about to end, so you can watch it on your own time. But when you get locked in, bro, you're gonna get locked in. It's up there.
At least I'll have a whole binge watching episode.
All right. Cool. So administrative items, man. If you are new to the Trap or Dive podcast, if you are listening or watching, whichever way you are doing it, make sure you hit that follow button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We definitely appreciate it. And then on the show today, man, it's all draft talk. Keith Sanchez, senior NFL draft analyst for the Draft Network and co-host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, joins us right now. Obviously, to preview the NFL draft, man. Keith, appreciate you joining us, big dog. How you feeling?
Oh, man, I'm good. I appreciate y'all having me. How y'all doing?
Man, I can't complain too much, man. Everything's straight on our end. And for those who don't know, because I saved this question purposefully for the podcast. Keith was part of the 2019 LSU staff that won the Natty as a personnel analyst. It's not too often, Keith, that we have somebody on the show, you know, who's been part of one of the best NFL or college football teams in its respective league's history, man. I gotta ask you, just walk us through that season. That was a crazy year. Hold on 1 second. What happened with AJ? Okay, boom. That was a crazy year, bro. And like, I didn't see it coming with LSU. I didn't over the years, that team was kind of building to that moment. But over the years, I didn't know what it would take for them to get over the hump in a sense. But you were there. You were foot on the ground, man. How did that season feel for you? And was that a year where you kind of knew that this was y'all championship year? Like it was no other team that was going to win it except for LSU?
Man, if I told you that, I'll be lying, right? I knew that we would have a really good football team, but what people always forget is the year before, right? Like that year that Joe Burrow won the Heisman, won the national championship, there was a year before that he was at LSU, and I think he threw maybe 22 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, right? Which is a okay football year. So I knew that we would have a good team because we had really good leaders. We were really competitive on all levels of the defense and offensively. We watched Justin Jefferson. We knew Jamar Chase. We knew Clyde can tote the rock. So I knew that we would have a good football team. But I mean, we have to be honest, right? We still play in the SEC. You know what I'm saying? And that's a week in, week out battle. So that's going through, Florida with Kyle Pitts, right? That's going through this, that vaunted Georgia defense. That's going through Bama, right? Which up until that point, I think it had been maybe 10 years since we had last beat them. It had been a good game, right? But was it really a rivalry if you don't beat them, right? And we had to beat them at home. So, man, to be honest, to answer your question, Mo, the process and the approach, and it's one that's kind of cliche, but it was one that Coach O just consistently emphasized. It was a week by week process, man. Like when it was week 1, we focused on who we were playing week 1. When it was week 2 to travel to Texas and that showdown, we focused on week 2. When it was week 8 to play Florida, we focused on Florida. Then when we got to Bama, I think that was the first time, and I had been around LSU for 5 years at that point, right? That was the first time I think there was like, you know what? We're not worried about them. We're going to worry about us. I think that was the first time that I think it was that attitude. I think there were years prior to where, we were so focused on Bama, but not focused on LSU. And so going into I think we played free, man. We played free. We played relaxed. You had guys like, and it's the players, man. It's the guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I know they're known for doing the gritty and stuff like that, but if you really pay attention to them, for the most part, they're guys that just go about balling out and going about their business, right? Like for the most part, that's who they are, and that's what happened, right? We stepped into Bama. We was like, you know what? We ain't worrying about them. We're not worrying about Trayvon Diggs and all those guys on that side of the football. We gonna ball out. We gonna hand it to y'all. We gonna walk up the field and do our thing. And man, once we got to the playoffs, I think it was more so, you know what, we here now. Let's just go win it. So I think it was a confidence, but it was not arrogant, but I think it was a confidence that, you know what, if we play our best football, then I'm not sure how many teams can hang with us.
But Keith, I wanted to follow up on that because obviously Joe Burrow, you mentioned him. Was there any point in that spring or summertime that you all saw as a staff, this guy is really going to take this leap? I mean, because he took a leap that, no one foresaw. I mean, because even our fans here, we talk about how Dwayne Haskins beat him out for the starting quarterback job at Ohio State before he transferred. So, I mean, was there a point in that spring, maybe the spring game, the summer, you said, man, this dude's different now?
Yeah, so those summer practices, those fall practices, and how those are structured are, you get 3 weeks pretty much leading up into the first week to practice of the game, right? And so those fall practices, every Saturday we would have scrimmages, and that's our offense versus the defense, right? So that's, you're talking about good on good, right? You're getting Derek Stingley guarding Jamar Chase. You're getting Grant Delpit guarding Justin Jefferson in the slot. You're getting Christian Fulton on Terrace Marshall. So that's NFL talent on NFL talent at the end of the day, right? And watching Joe Burrow, you seen this new offense where it was a lot more spread. It played to what his tools were, right? Like I'll tell anybody, man, you go to the park, wherever you line up Joe Burrow with 5 or 10 of the best NFL quarterbacks, I'm not sure you're going to walk away and say that Joe Burrow has the strongest arm, because he doesn't, right? Like, and he probably, his arm talent as far as power and strength is probably slightly above average, to be completely honest. And that's no knock to Joe. But what Joe is very cerebral. And that's what that offense allowed him to do, right? Like all of these option routes that you've seen Justin Jefferson running the slot, they seen the defense the exact same way Joe Burrow could get the ball out of his hands, right? And then now you see in Cincinnati, with him being able to throw those kind of back shoulder balls, those 50-50 balls to Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow has good touch on his football, right? So I think it was just a combination of everything that fit. We finally had an offense that, was high powered, but it also fit what Joe Burrow did, because the year before, I think that offense was predicated more on the quarterback having an elite level arm, right? Getting the I formation, play action, throw these 15, 20-yard comebacks and drill them, right? Like right before the defensive back get there. And that wasn't necessarily Joe Burrow's strongest suits, but the guy, he's a gamer. He's extremely tough. He's smart as hell. And he just knows how to, he's very precise with the football. And I think that's what kind of came about with that.
AJ, Dre, only we can hope that Sam Howell can blossom to the nearest degree that Joe Burrow did, man.
I ain't got no hope for that. Like,
I thought about leaving Sam Howell out this conversation. It probably wasn't fair to him.
I mean, you can't really leave him out the conversation when we got a guru on the line, because I mean, even what he just touched on with Joe Burrow, I was wondering if, like, now in his process, being in a different chapter of his life, how does he now evaluate quarterbacks after experiencing hands-on, a Joe Burrow, and the different intangibles that maybe you just can't teach at all, and that's that dog.
Yeah, no, and I think you hit on it, AJ. It's that dog, and man, if you just watch the quarterbacks and you say when there's chaos around, right? When I'm talking about like, free blitzers and the offensive line is losing, which quarterbacks are just simply making the right decisions? Which quarterbacks look comfortable when chaos is surrounding them? And that's what I learned, man. Like the best quarterbacks, they look comfortable in chaos because we draw it up and we watch these 7-on-7 camps and we talk about arm talent and arm strength and how far somebody can throw the football. But none of that matters if the minute that chaos hits, right, they start panicking. And I mean, you can apply that to anything in life, right? Like, would you want a friend that the minute y'all go out and chaos break out and he lose his mind? Like, you don't want that, right? You want somebody like, you know what, somebody's gonna stay cool, level-headed, and we're gonna be able to make calculated decisions all the way through this process. And that's kind of where I'm leaning with quarterbacks, man. Just watching them play in the pocket. See, okay, cool. It's free blitzers. What do they do with the football, right? Like, and it's those key moments. Okay, if it's 3rd and 8, and how do they throw the back shoulder football? Like just things like that. I think and I don't want to discredit the pro days, but when we're talking about Zach Wilson rolling out to his left, launching the football 80 yards down the field, and he goes pick number 2 because of that. I mean, then what are we doing, right? Like where do we go with this? And yes, he had arm strength and he can do that, but how many times did he do that in the NFL? So I look more at how, like, what a quarterback's demeanor. Like when you look in their eyes, like, and we've all been there, right? Playing park ball, high school, college, whatever, and you be like, man, that dude's scared. And it's the same thing on the field, man. Like, because previous to Joe Burrow, right? Or if I'm watching the opponent's team's quarterback, you can look in their eyes and you be like, that dude's scared. Like he don't want any parts of this. And I think that's something to it, man. When they talk about the eye test, look in their eyes, and you'll see a whole lot for it.
Within the respects, I wanted to get to your mock drafts, but on the respect to the quarterback conversation, and how you evaluate it, man, it's, say for Washington, right? You got Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell. They're supposedly battling out for QB1. But I don't think AJ or Dre, I think they're in the same boat as me, but I don't think that if something presents them, Washington has an opportunity presented to them to select a quarterback in the draft, not necessarily first round, but in the draft. I want to get this floor to you. If you had to rank your 4 quarterbacks based on how you evaluate them, Keith, what does those 4 look like? What the people with the dog in them, like, what does that look like for you? And who can Washington kind of look at to say, all right, well, if they're going to look into a quarterback, I think this person is the right one to fit in the mix because he has a decent shot of winning this thing.
Yeah, all right. So I'll start with number 1. My highest rated quarterback from this draft was Bryce Young. And I had to come to grips, right? Just like everybody else, understanding that, man, this guy's small, right? Like we haven't seen this before in the NFL. And I would be lying to y'all if I didn't tell you that his size scares the hell out of me, right? But I have to give him credit, man. This is a guy that went against Georgia in that defense. And, like I tell people, man, Jordan Davis didn't get any bigger in the NFL, right? That's the same Jordan Davis. Nakobe Dean didn't grow. Lewis Sign, Chris Smith, Keely Ringo, Devontae Wyatt, Jalen Carter, like all those guys are going to be the same size. And what I'm saying is that he's played against NFL caliber defenses already, and he's managed himself to figure that part out. So that's the part where I have to give him credit. I know size is a concern, but everything else, when you're talking about being cool, calm, collective, man, go cut on that Auburn tape for 2021, cut on that Florida tape for 2021, cut on the Texas tape for this year, and you see a guy in pressurized moments, he's just like, okay, cool, let's get the job done, right? In any game that Alabama has lost, I don't think you could directly point to Bryce Young and say that he didn't put his team in position to kick the field goal or whatever that may be to win the football game. The next up is CJ Stroud, man. And CJ coming into this year, I did have questions about him, whether that was going through all of his progressions and, being timely with it. But obviously the Georgia game, and I would say go watch the Michigan game before that. They lost. They got blown out by Michigan, a rival. But that was one of his best performances, man. Go check that game out. And then third, I would put Anthony Richardson. I think Anthony Richardson is third. I'll be completely honest. I'm going to say Anthony Richardson, then Will Levis. But both of those guys, there are a lot of things that they need to improve, right? And just watching the film is not great. You're not going to see great stuff on the film. You may see moments, but the consistency lacks. So those 2 are guys that I think need to be in situations that definitely tend towards their best assets.
Now, in your 2 most recent mock drafts, Washington selected Devon Witherspoon at 16. And right after that, you had Joey Porter Jr. and Deonte Banks both going to the Steelers at 17. with Washington, like why Witherspoon? And what were the biggest fit differences between Porter Jr. and Deonte Banks, and then Witherspoon at 16? What was the differences to select Witherspoon for both mock drafts in Washington?
Yeah, so I think Devon Witherspoon is a little bit more versatile than what he offers than what Joey Porter Jr. I think Joey Porter is strictly a outside corner, right? Because, he's a taller guy, longer. Now with Witherspoon, I think he's a guy that, and you've heard rumblings, right, about this is a guy that can possibly play sock because he's 5'11", 6 foot, right on that area. Those taller, longer guys, you usually don't want them to be able to travel and play in the slot because they're usually, they're taller, right? So they're higher hip. They don't have the quick transitions. They don't have the reactionary athleticism to hang with those smaller guys in the slot. So I thought about, as far as the Washington Commanders, just having, like matchup DBs, right? Like DBs that can travel, anywhere with any wide receiver. So that's why I went with the Witherspoon pick. I think he'll grade out higher than what Joey Porter Jr. would. Deonte Banks, I know you mentioned Deonte Banks, the corner out of Maryland, the DMV area. I like Deonte Banks a lot, man. He reminds me a lot of last year's Kaiir Elam out of Florida that the Buffalo Bills took in the first round. But I thought that Witherspoon was just a notch ahead of him. So that's why I had Deonte Banks going after.
Well, I wanted to ask you real quick, would Forbes be in Forbes out of Mississippi State? Would he be in that conversation with those three as well?
Yeah, for me, yeah, and so that's the weird part about the mock drafts, right? Is that we're predicting what people may do. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And we may have our positional rankings, right? But we also predicting, okay, we're looking at, GM's past history. We're looking at, obviously team needs, but then we also looking like, okay, in the past, would NFL GM select the cornerback that's 160 pounds? And that's what Emmanuel Forbes is. For me, you watch the film, Emmanuel Forbes is a dog, right? Like I think he's a high talent player. He reminds me a lot of Marcus Peters, the cornerback, they play for the Rams and the Ravens. Like he reminds me of that type of football player that he just takes the football away, man. Like it is what it is, right? I had one NFL scout, I was talking to him at the Senior Bowl, and we're talking about Emmanuel Forbes, and he's like, look, Emmanuel Forbes broke the record, I believe, for pick sixes in NCAA history. And he was like, man, you know how long they've been playing college football, right? And you think about that, it's like, man, you have to give this guy credit for just being cerebral, really smart football player. So while I may have him graded as a top 25, top 30 football player, when we go to the mock drafts a little bit, it's a little bit more predictive of what I think the NFL general managers may do. And, obviously we know there's thresholds for like height, weight, things like that. But, man, Emmanuel Forbes is a baller.
Yeah, I don't know. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah. It's the little video delay, but we can hear you.
Yeah, but yeah, I was just like, I don't know. I'm in the Matrix over here video wise, but I definitely like Emmanuel Forbes. I think he's a ball hog. Kind of reminds me of like you said, Marcus Peters and Asante Samuel. They just got a knack for the ball. Like they're not gonna make no plays in the run game, but at the end of the day, you can't teach that intangible of being able to flip the field for an offense. And like you said, it's unfortunate that some of these teams value certain things more than the other. But I guess what I wanted to ask you is crazy. I want to say maybe a couple of weeks ago, I had came across you and some of your partners talking about the running back position. I'm very high on Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. And formerly at Georgia Tech, and I believe that he's running back number one in this draft. What's your opinion on that? And do you see him as bringing more value to an NFL team more so than your traditional back, such as a Bijan Robinson?
Yeah, AJ, I started smiling, man, when you said that because that's something I've been battling, for the past couple of months, man. If Jahmyr Gibbs is in fact RB1, but what I think is this, man. I think when I put in my final grades, they'll probably be damn near equal in grade, but I think they offer you different things. And I have so much respect for Jahmyr Gibbs and his ability to catch the ball, period. Like, and I think we're used to hearing running backs kind of, oh, he could catch the ball out of the backfield. That's what we need. I'm like, no, like this guy is different. Like I think he's a wide receiver. Like he goes on most teams and he's the wide receiver 3. So in reference to the Commanders, right? I think this is a guy that steps in and he's wide receiver 3 behind, behind y'all starting 2 wide receivers, right? Dotson and I'm blanking on our guy.
Terry.
Yeah. He's wide receiver 3. So you think about that being a passing weapon, right? But then
over Curtis too, over Curtis.
Yeah, I think the dude that nice, man. I think the dude is that nice. I think he's that talented. And then you talk about putting him in the backfield, and this guy is actually a running back. Like this is a guy that hits the hole. He gets skinny in the hole. He's able to manipulate, level by level. So I appreciate this guy's game so much. You'll hear me talk about the running back conversation. I know that's a hot topic in the NFL, right? Like the devaluation of running backs, like just, say that they're not good. But I always look at the opposite corner that like, okay, cool. Well, Todd Gurley ran the Los Angeles Rams to a Super Bowl, right? Like that wasn't Jared Goff. That was Todd Gurley. Ezekiel Elliott, when the Cowboys were having their better years, that was Ezekiel Elliott toting the rock for that team. And, you talk about Derrick Henry, right? Where would the Tennessee Titans be without Derrick Henry? So I think those special backs, I think you draft the special ones appropriately and then in their talent slot, because you're talking about letting those 2 guys slide. And I'll say this, if the NFL lets Jahmyr Gibbs slide all the way to 31 or 32 to the Kansas City Chiefs, good luck. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a wrap.
Yeah, one of my things that bothered me, and I was going to actually present the situation to you, like understanding the thoughts of roster needs and then understanding like the best player available. Like if your roster needs consist of XYZ and like the best player available on the board when you're about to pick is outside of your top 3 roster needs, but he is the best player available, and you can use him on the field, and he's gonna be a playmaker for you, i.e. a running back for Washington, who they can. I don't disagree. Like we had this conversation last couple of weeks. You can use a running back. Washington can use a game breaker in Bijan or Jahmyr at running back. If you're a GM, like how are you kind of meshing the thought of like that BPA versus roster need and how important that is to you in the first round of a draft?
Yeah, I love this question, man, because it is something that needs to be talked about more, right? And we just talked about the devaluation of running backs, and it's like, okay, so you mean to tell me on draft night you're gonna tell me I should select the 6th best corner versus taking a generational running back, right? Like that makes no sense to me. And I've always, because obviously with my past experience and stuff, what I've learned is that the dudes are dudes, man. You know what I'm saying? Like no matter what position they play, they find a way to impact the game. And I want as many blue chip guys on my team, regardless of the position. I want those guys on my team. And people look at it and say, okay, well, you need corners. You don't need linebackers, and you need a couple other positions, right? But you look at how the San Francisco 49ers are constructed. They have a linebacker who everybody say you don't need linebackers, right? They traded for Christian McCaffrey. They don't have the quarterback, and they have some solid wide receivers. So they've went after positions that the NFL has told us that you don't need. But guess what? This is a team that made it all the way to the NFC Championship. So, Mual, to answer your question, I'm with you, man. Like take the blue chip prospect. Now, if you're talking about team needs versus taking best player available, I think that's why the free agency period is so important, because the free agency period is proven commodities, right? Like the draft is a gamble. They tell us 50% of first round picks hit and don't hit, right? So the draft is somewhat a gamble. So I think with the free agency period, teams should go after, try to fill as many team needs as they can. And then now just take the best player available to kind of simplify that process. Because when you start reaching, man, to the 7th corner, or you trying to find an edge rusher that only had, 10 sacks throughout his whole career in college, and you think he's going to step right in, it's like you're taking a gamble. So I'd rather fill out the team needs through via free agency and take best player available, and especially if it falls in my top 3 positional needs.
So Keith, just to touch on that, I guess that's my issue in particular with a lot of teams in the NFL, but of course we are a podcast that focuses on the Washington Commanders, and a lot of the fans are predicting and projecting that they're going to select a offensive lineman And I feel as though you should take the blue chip player, especially when you don't have many blue chip players, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And the devaluation of running backs is really like mind blowing to me because, like you stated, teams that have been successful over the recent years, such as the Rams, the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Cowboys, and so on, have all been heavily reliant on the running game. Do you feel as though like Washington should primarily just focus on offensive line or cornerback there at 16, or should they possibly look to add more weapons, especially bringing Eric Bieniemy in to be their offensive coordinator? And I guess projected right now, Sam Howell is supposed to be the starter at quarterback. I guess let me even rephrase the question. Do you think for a young quarterback such as Sam Howell, who brings more value to him, a tight end or running back that also brings receiving qualities into play? And I guess you could say this is like me pitching for Jahmyr Gibbs once again.
Yeah, I didn't know if you was about to pitch in right there, but
I just wanted to know about some offensive linemen, but I can swing it on the back end. Go ahead.
All right, cool. Yeah, so this draft, man, is in both positions, AJ. At running back, right? Like you have your two premier guys, and then I think that if those two premier guys there, and it comes down to running back and tight end, I'm taking the running backs. Because this tight end class, man, and nobody's talking about them. This is a deep tight end class. Like this is, and it's a deep class to where I think it probably goes 7-8 tight ends that I think in some capacity will start for an NFL team. Because nobody's talking about Iowa's tight end Sam Laporta, right? Or Michigan has a tight end named Luke Schoonmaker, who we know that Eric Bieniemy just came from the Kansas City Chiefs with Travis Kelce, who's a dynamic guy. Like that's a one-off, right? So I know you're looking for a pretty good football player at the tight end position. And I think those guys, Oregon State's Luke Musgrave is another guy that's 6'6", runs in the open field, really smooth, things like that. So I think you can find a tight end in the second or third round to where if those blue chips running backs are sitting right there, you definitely take one, because I'm with you, AJ. I'm with surrounding a young quarterback with as much talent as possible, because there is something to learning the NFL game the wrong way, man. And, you always flash back to Sam Darnold saying he's seeing ghosts, right? And, essentially what did that mean? That mean he was seeing stuff that was not there because he's been hit so many times, wide receiver ran wrong routes. He didn't have anything dependable to where now he's seeing stuff that's not even there. And you would hate for a young quarterback like Sam Howell, who, if y'all hit on Sam Howell, right, you're talking about a quarterback that you have under contract for the next couple of years that you found in the fifth round, like that could be a success story that now turns into a bad story because you didn't surround them with enough pieces. So I'm all for surrounding the quarterbacks with pieces.
Keith, man, I appreciate the time that you have with us. I have two more questions. Like I said, the first one, offensive line. I'm a fan of Peter Skoronski and Osiris Torrance at their natural positions for Washington. I mean, obviously, Osiris is going to stay inside. I like him at left guard, the possibility with him, and I like Skoronski at tackle. What do you think about those two guys? Where do you have them ranked in their respective positions, or do you even have a projection for Skoronski at being kicked inside? What do you think about those two? And if you just had to give a number, it's just a blind number, a percentage of them actually making it to 16. What percent do you give it?
So I'll start with the percentage. I think there's a 60% chance that they make it to 16, because I think people like this offensive tackle class, but like one of those top three, well, I think Torrance would definitely be there, but one of the top three tackles, right? You're talking about Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, or Peter Skoronski. From everything I'm hearing, that the NFL likes them, but doesn't necessarily love them. And that's with all three of them. So I think that one will be there for them to select. Now, in regards to Peter Skoronski, I like Peter also, man. And I think that he's getting a knock because he doesn't have the extreme length. And then when you talk about a tackle moving a guard, well, I'm like, hey, this is simply a football player, right? Like this is still a starting level player. And if you're talking about a guy that may be a starting tackle in the NFL, but then he also has the potential to be a Pro Bowl interior offensive lineman, like left guard or right guard, then if you take that guy, then that's a good football player, right? Like, and I keep saying this, I'm about just taking good football players that's proven. So I do like Peter Skoronski, and I like the fact that he can stretch at tackle, but then this guy can definitely play guard also, so he can fill whatever need you don't necessarily address through the rest of free agency and throughout the rest of the draft.
All right. So here we go. This is the first time I even asked this question before ever, fellas. But let's say offense or defense. What's the side that you favor the most, Keith? What side is that?
Oh man, I'm a defensive guy at heart, man. I'm a defensive guy at heart.
All right, so defensive. Let's build a team right quick, man. Your favorite team, like your ideal defense. Whether it's the alignment wise or whether it's the type of traits that you want. Whether it's you want all athletes or you want somebody who's like however you want to structure your defense, right? So we're going to have defensive line, linebacker, cornerback, safety. One person from each level of the defense. Defensive line, I'll give you two because you need an edge guy, you need an interior guy. So defensive line, linebacker, cornerback, safety. Your prospects in mind from this draft, and maybe I should have gave you this question ahead of time. You got time to think about it. It's perfectly fine. But if you were to build a defense from this draft class based on the people that you've evaluated over the past few months and things like that, what would your ideal defense be? Who would those prospects be? And why would you put them there?
Right.
That's all I got for you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. So and I get to take all first rounders.
Hey, do what you gotta do. Hey, I'm not going to limit you. I'm not going to restrict you. The floor is yours. Go whichever way you want to.
All right, I'll be a little versed in it then, man. I'll go if you're talking interior defense. Well, first of all, I like 3-4. I like eye fronts. I like different schemes. I like throwing different things at offensive linemen, right? To see if they'll just miss protections or you know what I'm saying. Like the quarterback and the center are not on the same page. So I like seeing multiple fronts. So if I'm gonna go interior defensive lineman, I think Jalen Carter is the premier guy. So I'll go with him with the top pick. I go interior defensive line. I'll go Jalen Carter. Right now, edge rusher. I say I'm gonna get a little verse in my bag. So that's why I'll take all first rounders. Mm-hmm. Edge rusher. I'll go Tennessee's Byron Young as a stand-up outside linebacker. Man, I like that guy's first step explosiveness. I really like what he can do and what he can offer. Obviously, Will Anderson is my number one ranked edge. But like I said, I'm going to be a little versed and throw out some different names. So Tennessee's edge rusher, Byron Young is definitely who I will go with next. If you're talking about linebacker, the guy that I think is the most instinctual inside linebacker is Henry To'o. Like watching that guy play inside linebacker, he flows inside the outside. I think he's a guy that we're going to over-evaluate, and then everybody's going to be like, damn, he's a really good football player. How do we miss on him? And it's because we overvalue the combine type stuff. But this is a 3-year starter in the SEC. Played at Bama, instinctual as hell, smart, physical, fast flow, everything. I really like him. Cornerback, man. Cornerback is tough, man, because I like a lot of these corners in this draft. But I will go with I'm going to go with Deonte Banks, man. I like what Deonte Banks could be. You're talking about just because he has natural size, man. So I think this is a press man corner that if you just get some instinct stuff together, you're talking about 30, 40 yards down the field as far as ball skills, I think you potentially have a lockdown corner. So I really like Deonte Banks. Then at safety, like this is just he played for Georgia, so he is a bulldog, but he's just a dog, period, man. And I'm going with Chris Smith. Like the dude is not very big. He's under 5'11", under 200 pounds, but he just got that dog in him. So I'm going Chris Smith at safety. So that's my team. If I'm have various round picks, and I'm going one player from each position. That's what I'm going with.
Sounds good. Hey, wait, sure you had something? Oh, AJ, yeah, I know somebody said
I
something.
wanted to ask a quick question. So I don't know, of course, Keith, like this is a busy time of the year, and you're probably indulging in your own work. But there was a recent analyst by the name of Chris Sims that works for NBC Sports that made his top 5 pass rusher list. And on that list, he has Tyreek Wilson, 1. I think number 2 was Luca Van Ness. 3 was Nolan Smith. 4 was McDonald. And then 5 was Will Anderson. you mentioned in your mock that we just had you do as far as your best players for their positions that you would select. Why are some people down on Will Anderson? Is it because he doesn't scream freak, like a freak athlete to them? Like what's the issue? I mean, yeah, there was some drop off tape wise from 2021 to 2022, but like what do you see about him and how he'll translate to the next level? Because right now we have a team that we all pegged him to be going to, the Arizona Cardinals at 3, now kind of publicly putting out there that they want to trade back. Our team's just not getting it with Will Anderson and not understanding the player, and more so looking for freaks more so than just a solid overall player that could be in this league for a long time.
So AJ, to shortly answer your question, and I'll go in depth of them. I have no idea what Chris Sims was doing with that list, man. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, man. I couldn't disagree more with that list, especially the players that's on there, ahead of Will Anderson. I'll say this: if you're talking about, if I'm being like super critical of Will Anderson, there is pass rush stuff that he needs to work on. I know this is a guy that had extreme amounts of production, right? But a lot of his production came via twists and stunts, right? So it wasn't him just like, if you watch the film, it's not him just one-on-one beating offensive tackles, him using an array of pass rush moves to beat the offensive tackle. A lot of this stuff is, the interior defensive lineman shoots across his face and then he loops around in for the sack. So that may be with something, with some of the reasons why people are being critical of Will Anderson. But man, I'm buying into it. I'm sorry. Like, this is a guy that I recruited when I was at LSU. Like, you're talking about one of the highest character people. And when I say character, I'm not just talking about like, oh, he's really good, in the classroom. I'm talking about character, like football character that's going to come in. He's going to demand excellence from everybody else. You don't have to worry about his mode or how hard he's going to play. He's going to leave it all out there on the football field. He loves the game. So I have no idea the disdain for Will Anderson. I don't know if some people, trying to do some different things. They want to try something different. But all four of those guys that you put ahead of Will Anderson, I would have them significantly behind Will Anderson, like significantly. Like, because Tyree, and I'll continue, Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, those are guys that you don't even know if they're going to play defensive end. I don't know if they have the first step elite quickness when you're talking about hand in the ground or outside linebacker to be able to beat offensive tackles consistently. These are big body guys that you're probably going to push inside in a 3-4 scheme. So we're on the Commanders podcast, right? So everybody's familiar with a guy like Ryan Kerrigan. I think they're closer to Ryan Kerrigan's than what they are to these elite level pass rushers. And Ryan Kerrigan is that's the top part of that, right? Like, there's still a lot of average guys that play good against the run with not
even
elite.
Kerrigan was average as hell. So I mean,
you ain't got to sugarcoat it over here.
So that's why I see those guys, man. And Will McDonald, he's a talented football player, but I still think there's a lot that he needs to improve on to be able to jump Will Anderson.
Keith, man, hey, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sticking with us a little bit past the time I asked. But it's definitely appreciated, man. Great conversation. I want to give you the floor to plug anything and everything that you got going on, big dog. Once again, we appreciate you, bro.
Oh, man, definitely, man. Like you said, man, at the top of the show, man, senior draft analyst at the Draft Network, man. So we're talking about scouting reports, man. Go check those scouting reports. We probably have over 300 guys written up. Check them out during the draft. So if you want to know the ins and outs, I know a lot of people do mock draft simulators, right? So if there's some players that you're trying to figure out, man, go to the Draft Network. Pull up those scouting reports. Then you can reach me at The Talent Code, man, on Twitter, man. Shoot me a question, DM me, holler at me. We can talk about it. And then, me and myself, and then my guy, Damian Parsons, my co-host, we host the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, man, on the Locked On NFL Network. Man, that's 5 days a week, 35 minutes. We cover things involving the NFL draft, a little bit of NFL conversation, college conversation, a really dope podcast. So make sure to, man, go subscribe to that. You can find it on YouTube or any of these, streaming platforms as far as with podcasts.
Yes, sir. There it is.
Damn, set, watch him throw the ball. We gon' pick it off. You gon' let him hit the hole or you gon' cut it off. You gon' play through 4th and long or you gon' punt it off. Your defenders, heavy hitters, put your pads in. Don't be looking for the ref to throw no flags in. Keep the helmet on. Keep the cleats tight. You the type to want to win by any means, right? You should look alive. This is Trap or Die.